Aloha, and welcome to another episode of TuneInTiki with Christina and Callie. Stay tuned to the end of the episode. Today, we're bringing back the drink segment. Today's drink of the episode is the Coffee Grog.
Today, we're talking with Will Fugate, the proud owner of Tiki Classics and Katiki. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Will Fugate. I am the owner of Tiki Classics and Katiki Classic Mugs in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I am a tiki mug maker and a ceramic lamp maker, and I love rum.
Cheers to that.
Yeah.
What's your favorite rum?
I'm an Appleton guy. Appleton's like the workhorse rum, right? You can use that in a million different things. If any drink calls for any type of Jamaican rum, I just go Appleton and I don't even question it. So that's what's in here.
That's what's in ours as well.
It's the best.
What inspired you to start Katiki Classic Mugs, and how did your love for vintage tiki imagery influence this decision?
It was sparked by my good buddy Mike Biggs of Biggs Tiki. He's been a longtime good friend of mine here in Vegas. He worked at the tattoo shop that my best friend worked at, and we were friends through that channel. And he knew I was a big tiki guy, and he decided to start making mugs one day just because he's an artist and that's what he does. And he started asking me advice and questions on how to go about making mugs and what people were into and the process and this and that. I told him as much as I could. So I didn't really know everything about making a mug. And through that process, I would watch a lot of videos to try to kind of help him, give him any advice I could. I've always been a big vintage tiki guy. Helping him with that process, I just kind of had this idea that I wanted to recreate these vintage 12-inch tiki lamps that people made in the 60s back in hobbyist classes like the Color Me Mine of the time. They did big 12-inch Jamar Mallory tiki statues, and sometimes people would make lamps out of them, like TV lamps. And through that process of helping Mike, I had this idea, like I want to recreate those. I want to do that. And I already had all this knowledge from kind of helping him. I'd never made anything in my life. So I just said, I'm going to try that. And I literally bought a kiln and all the supplies and just did it. And like, that's just where it started. Like when Mike started making tiki mugs, I remember walking into his tattoo shop and he had a can of tennis balls and he was wrapping clay around a can of tennis balls. And that's how he was learning how to make the cylinder of a tiki mug. Now everything he does is 3D sculpted and crazy, but that's how far back I've seen Mike through this process. And yet watching him do that just kind of sparked it. So he's responsible. He's at fault. He's responsible for the mug and the ceramic side. It's all his fault.
When you're collaborating with artists like Mike, but any artists bring the mugs to, what is the process that you go through? What would be step one?
Step one is having an idea, right? I've always been a huge fan of the Aku Aku here in Las Vegas. I'm kind of super obsessed with it. The old Aku Aku. That was the first mug I collaborated with Mike Biggs. He wanted to make something tiki mug because he was just making all these horror themed mugs. And I shot that idea out. This is before I had ever made a mug. I said, hey, I've got an idea. You need an Aku Aku tribute mug. Nobody's done that before. So we collaborated on that. So it really was just the idea I had of making something that nobody's ever made before that I would like, that I knew other people would like. That's kind of how it goes. Something sparks your interest. And if it's not something you are particularly good at or something you're super interested in, but you think it will be cool, shoot it to somebody else and see what they think, And he'd never made a tiki mug before. And he decided, hey, man, that's a good idea. And he made it and it was awesome. And it sold out in seconds. And it's a killer mug.
It really is an amazing mug. We love it.
One of my favorites. I actually shipped all those mugs out for him. So Mike doesn't like to do the shipping part. So I said, since my name is on it, that's actually the first tiki mug that had my Tiki Classics name on it, was that Aku Aku mug. So I said, part of the deal, I said, you put my name on the mug and I'll do all the shipping for you.
So what sets Katiki Classic mugs and Tiki Classics apart from other tiki mug producers?
Tiki Classics initially started out of my love for vintage tiki. And I wanted to kind of recreate and reimagine vintage tiki mugs that never really existed, which wasn't something a lot of people were doing. So it kind of was going to be my thing, which is how it started. It kind of evolved into some other things like banana bobs and bananas with tiki bob faces on it, and UFOs with moai and light beams. It evolved into other things. But I think at the core, it's my love for vintage tiki. And that is kind of where I'm at with the Katiki classic mugs, which is my import line, which is all kind of modern interpretations of vintage tiki that either existed and I just recreated it, or it never existed and I reimagined it. So I think that's what sets me apart is the vintage aspect, because I'm a vintage guy through and through. Like I love vintage tiki. It's a passion and an obsession. I think that's what makes my stuff a little different. It's mostly vintage,
Yeah.
just some stuff that's not, but it's for the most part it's vintage inspired.
And I have to say, I love the concept because recently we've been hearing a lot about, oh, well, I had a drink at this one tiki bar and it had this awesome mug and I wish I got it. And it's kind of awesome to give the people that opportunity to get something that they maybe weren't able to get before. So now, you're reproducing things that are going to like trigger that
Nostalgia.
memory.
Sure, yeah. There's people in the tiki world who are super, super into vintage, and that's really all they care about. And there's people who just want every mug that's ever made. They don't care. They just hoard them all and they want everything. There's people who are into more of the Disney stuff, the fantasy, horror stuff. But the vintage people are the people that, I connect with the most. Like, for instance, this was the first, you're drinking out of this one right now. This was the first Katiki mug. This is a mug based off of the lamp, the very first thing I ever created, which is a 1960s ceramic lamp. And so that was in my mind was going to be the first mug that we made with Katiki for sure. It was going to be a recreation of that. It's just a classic 1960s vintage tiki style mug. The colors aren't necessarily vintage; they're solid color. They don't have those kind of sloppy wipes and things that they did back in the day, which I love. They're more solid, but that's where everything is sparked for me is the vintage stuff. I love the vintage.
Yeah.
It's the best. Yeah.
I love that. I love the nostalgia of it. They do have a very retro feel.
I actually have a Katiki mug coming out, which is going to be a bucket mug from Tiki Bob's. This is going to be the next Katiki release that's coming out soon. This is the classic vintage bucket mug that never existed, but I wanted, because Tiki Bob's didn't use a lot of, 50 bars used this mug, but Tiki Bob's didn't, and I wanted them to, so I just made it. So this is going to be the next Tiki Bob mug coming out. I'm super excited about that one. That one's going to be here soon, in 6 weeks or so.
Do you have a date for that one yet, or not yet?
I think it'll be here in about 6 weeks. Those I'm actually, those are being made with the import line, but they're unglazed, so I'm going to be glazing those myself. So it's kind of, it's something I created, something I came up with, but I had the factory make all of the mugs because it just saves me tons of time, and there's going to be 400 of them, and I just didn't have the time to do all that. So they're going to come to me unglazed, and I'm going to spend the time glazing them, and they're going to be cool. I'm excited about it. Another Bob. Cheers to Bob.
Yeah, you've got your work cut
Never
out
have enough
for
Bobs.
you, but I feel like that'll be very impressive. A lot of people are going to want that one.
And I have a Megala Bob coming out, a Bob on a big shark tooth. So I have a couple of Bobs coming out.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're huge Bob fans, so we are very much looking forward to that.
I'll make sure you get one. Don't worry about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So aside from just the amount of work that you're obviously always doing, we can tell you are always working really hard. But what have some of the biggest challenges that you've faced been since you started Katiki Classics? Like, were there specific things that you've struggled with?
The biggest challenge for me, learning the process for one. I started with those lamps, which were fairly simple, but I did some weird things to them, and I developed this crazy lava glaze that has been really popular over the last few years.
Yes,
Yeah.
The struggle for me is I'm a little too ambitious, and I look at a project and I think, okay, here's what it's going to take to get this done. Here's how much time it's going to take me. And I am a part-time mug maker. I have a full-time job, a full-time government job. I do this part-time, which has turned into a full-time job on top of my other full-time jobs. I devote as much time as I possibly can to it. The struggle for me was that I was a little ambitious, and I would run some numbers and think, okay, I can do this mug in this amount of time. And then I would do a pre-sale. Anybody who's ever done a pre-sale with me has always gotten their item. It may have been late because it just takes me longer than I thought it would. That's the biggest struggle for me is doing a pre-sale, trying to map out the amount of time it would take, and then it just never ever even comes close to what I thought it would be. And it's a struggle I always deal with. And I always kick myself for doing another pre-sale, but I always wind up doing it, and it never pans out very well. Because there's when you're working with clay and pottery, there's a lot of problems that can arise, and they happen a lot. A lot of us went through, right after COVID, we went through a lot of issues with our clay cracking, because there was, like everything else in the world, there were supply chain issues with the factories and the producers of the clay. And I was pulling entire batches of mugs and lamps out of my kiln that were completely destroyed, just cracked, and all that time and money, and it's just gone, and it's completely devastating. On top of people who have already paid for that, who are waiting for it, and now you got to tell them, hey, it's like I said, I'm having issues. Things are delayed. Things are cracking. Glaze. I'm having glaze issues right now, actually, with another pre-sale, but those are actually turning out pretty well. But it's just more. It's the science of pottery that I think is the biggest challenge, because I don't think anybody ever masters this stuff. You think you got it down. You think you got a system down. You got the glaze. Everything's perfect, and then an entire batch comes out and it's destroyed, and you don't know why, and it's completely infuriating. So, yeah, that's the two biggest challenges are me trying to get things done on time, with a limited amount of time that I have, and dealing with supply issues where things just want to fight you at every turn.
You have a great reputation, and it seems like a very frustrating overall process. And even hearing that you have another full-time job too, we really appreciate like the amount of time and effort that must be going into that. And I'm sure even the buyers can see that, but I completely know where you're coming from. I deal with customer service every day, so
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a struggle, but I got to tell you, the Tiki people, the Tiki community in general are pretty incredible, and
yeah,
they just want to be kept in the loop, right? They don't want to be sitting for months and months and months thinking about that. Well, where's my product? Why is it not here? I try and send out as many updates as I possibly can on my product and say, this is what's happening. We're going to try to get it done at this time. We might have this issue, but it's coming. I'm working on it. I try to keep people in the loop, and that's big. It's big because people really, if you don't let them know what's going on and you keep them in the dark, that's when things start to go awry.
I can see on that note how like the real-time communication can really help mitigate people having a bad experience. Even if it does take longer, you're an artist, you're doing it by hand, like you're providing them with a unique product, so I'm sure that they can be understanding of that.
Yeah. Like I said, 98% are amazing, and they totally get it. It's not an easy process, and it has its issues, and it's going to get there. But there will always be a few that don't see it that way, but that's fine. If I get a 98% success rate, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the beginning. What got you into Tiki?
That's a good question. I get asked that question a lot, and it really was a lifetime of being surrounded by. I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida. You're all familiar with that, and there's no real tiki in that area, but there's what Florida tiki, poolside tiki bars
Right.
with bamboo and thatching everywhere. And you're surrounded by that, and nautical themed bars, which as a kid were always my favorite thing in the world. I loved that. And I have very vivid memories of my first job I ever had. I was 13, and I worked for this guy who had a newspaper called the Mobile Home News. It was like a penny saver for people who wanted to buy mobile homes in Florida, right? And I was 12 or 13, and I would get in his big station wagon. This was 1987, 88. I'm old. And we would drive up and down Beachside in Daytona, and we'd stop at every hotel, and I would get out and take a stack of these and put them in the lobby for, tourists to see the mobile home sales letter, whatever it was. Those tiny little mom and pop hotels up and down A1A and Beachside. It's got a lobby the size of my bathroom. I would just walk in, drop it off, and be gone. But I have vivid memories as a kid of always pulling up A1A and seeing the A-frame for the Hawaiian Inn coming down the bend, and I would go, man. And I looked so forward to going into the Hawaiian Inn. We pull in under that big porte-cochere with the A-frame, and I'd walk in, and they had that big outrigger hanging over the ceiling, and I was just like, at 13 years old, I was like, oh my, this place is so awesome. very vivid memories of that. And Tiki Inn a little further down the road with the big moa and had glowing eyes at the time.
Mhm.
And when I was in third grade, I actually lived in Ormond Beach. My elementary school was on the beach in Ormond, right next door to Julian's, which was another famous
Oh,
Polynesian
yeah.
building. And riding the school bus every morning, I remember looking at that building every morning, just thinking it was the coolest thing in the world. So Tiki has always kind of been ingrained in my brain. I've always loved it, enjoyed it, and I really think it was the Hawaiian Inn. Oddly enough, with your history with the Hawaiian Inn, it was. We would go there when I had family visiting from Ohio and other parts. They would always stay at the Hawaiian Inn, and we would go hang out at the pool there. As an adult, I would go hang out at that tiki bar at the pool all the time and drink those crappy sugary drinks and just get a 3-day hangover from it. And I always loved that place and never really knew the history of it or understood what it was all about, but I just always loved it. And that was a big part of it. I think that's kind of what sparked it. And then being in Vegas, being in Vegas now for the last 20 years, there's so much tiki history here. And we spend a lot of time at Viva Las Vegas every year. And there's a lot of tiki crossover there. And it just kind of slowly just kind of enveloped me over my life. And then I discovered that there were actually people that were into this probably 10, 11 years ago. And that's when it just kind of took me over. And it was like, okay, this is the stuff I've been into my whole life and didn't really realize it. I've loved all this stuff. I just didn't really know it was a thing. And now it's everything.
Yeah.
It's a big part of my
I
life.
love that
huge
origin
part.
story. That's awesome that even as a teenager, you felt the magnetism towards pop culture and polypop, and you were just like, Hawaiian Inn, what is this? Because that's
that place.
for me
It's
too.
still,
That's when I got more into tiki.
yeah, it still blows me away. Every time I go home, I make a cruise down beachside just to see the Hawaiian Inn. I'll walk in the lobby and I'll look around, and you walk down random dank, humid hallways, and there's just random Whitco pieces hanging up over hotel rooms. Yeah,
Kelly showed me that
so much history there. One hallway that goes to like the tiki room. It still has that carved sign that says tiki room or something, tiki banquet hall, whatever it is. That's that one hallway. When you walk in and to the right, there's that crazy Whitco piece just hanging above like a fire alarm. I'm like, God, there's so much history here. It's crazy.
Well, there's those panels with different colors, and then the 2 Whitco benches and everything.
Yeah. And they got the fountain. They got it all.
The fountain, yeah.
I can't believe I didn't mention this. I probably shouldn't because my wife will probably be mad. My first marriage was in 1993. I was 18 years old, like a dummy. Got married. And we didn't have a traditional wedding. We got married by like the Justice of the Peace, like on like by the baseball stadium, like by Jackie Robinson.
Okay.
And by a guy. He was the head of the Boy Scouts. He literally had like a Boy Scout uniform on. It was like a big Boy Scout convention. It's a crazy story. But we didn't have any kind of honeymoon or anything planned. We didn't have money for that. We just wanted to get married, kind of get it over with. And I came home. My mom had surprised me with 2 nights at the Hawaiian Inn and the luau tickets. So that's like where I spent my honeymoon for my first wife was at the luau at the Hawaiian Inn. Yeah. That was 93.
That
That
is
was
awesome.
30 years ago.
Yeah. It's a special place.
It really is. That A-frame is unmatched. There's no other A-frame like that in America. It's unbelievable.
No. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very cool.
All right. So on this season of TuneInTiki, we have a question. We've been thinking a lot about cultural appropriation, and hanging out with Sven Kirsten has inspired us to ask this question. So the question is, when it comes to Tiki and all the classics and Whitco and Oceanic Arts and all of the Polynesian pop, is it appropriation or is it appreciation?
I think if you ask me or anybody in my situation, it's 1,000% appreciation. But when somebody on the other side tells me it's appropriation, I listen and I take it in. But I also feel like that shouldn't forbid me from appreciating it at the same time, because I love that culture. I love everything about it. I tell my wife all the time that I should have been born in Hawaii. Like, I am completely obsessed with the culture, the land, the history, everything. It's just everything to me. And I'm trying to move to Hawaii. Actually, I know the issues involved with that, but I would love to live there. For me, it's 100% appreciation.
I know you said Hawaiian Inn is one of your favorites. So is your all-time favorite personal mug from the Hawaiian Inn, or what's your favorite personal mug? And then what's your favorite that your company has created?
Oh boy, my favorite mug. Gosh,
Loaded question, right?
that is so loaded. Holy cow. Oh my gosh. 'Cause, I'm a vintage guy, and I actually just
Yeah.
sold a big chunk of my vintage collection, a lot of it. But it's because I'm just doing some remodeling, and it started to feel like I was hoarding a little bit. I needed to kind of move on from some stuff. I still love it. I still have a lot of it. I could make a list of 20 vintage bugs right now that are my favorite, but I can't go down that route. I think my favorite mug, my God.
What's your favorite?
Okay. Okay, I'll tell you. Let me put it this way. My favorite tiki artist of all time is Gecko. I think Gecko is the king of tiki. Not only because his stuff is super incredibly traditional, and he's obviously Hawaiian, and the stuff he makes. Gecko to me is the king of tiki. Everything he does, I'm into. I don't care what it is. There's other tiki artists that I admire and like. Sometimes make a mug, and I'm like, not super into it, but I get it. Gecko, he makes it. I'm into it. I've got quite a few Gecko mugs. I'd say my favorite mug in my collection is probably the two-headed Moai Kava Kava. He actually just made one recently and posted it on his Instagram. I have one with the
Yeah.
blue crackle and the lava base. That's probably my favorite mug. Yeah, in my personal collection. Yeah, he's just the best. I love everything he does. Shout out to you, Gecko. Gecko knows I love him. My favorite mug I ever created was the first mug I ever made. The first mug that I ever actually sculpted from clay and fired and glazed and did all by myself. The very first one is this guy right here. I've got it right here. This is the
Oh.
this is the
Yeah.
tiki that used to stand out in front of the Castaways here in Las Vegas, which is now where the Mirage is, which is where the Hard Rock is going to be. This was kind of a tribute to that big crazy tiki that stood out front. This is the first thing I ever made. I just took a chunk of clay and I made it, and I put the Castaways logo on there, and their other logo is on the back. I don't know if you can see that. It's right there. But this is the favorite mug I've ever made, because it was not just because it was a first, but I just love it. I think it's awesome.
So,
I had that
as our
kind
last question of the night for you, what are your future plans for both of your brands right now, and any exciting new designs or collections that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I showed you one. That one I'd already shown before. It's going to come out soon. That Tiki Bob bucket mug. That's the next Katiki mug coming out. As far as my handmade stuff, like I said before, my intentions with Tiki Classic was to recreate reimagine some vintage stuff into modern day mugs and lamps and things and bowls, which I've done. I've done quite a few. But I kind of veered off at some point into making the banana bobs and things like that in this Mystery of the Moai bowl, which is very popular. This is the one that I'm working on right now. I'm trying to get these things shipped out. This thing is a lot of work, and it's a crazy thing. Once this is done, once this Mystery of the Moai bowl is done, I think with Tiki Classics, I'm going to get back to the more vintage style stuff. I have a Ku mug I'm working on right now, which is going to be more traditional vintage Tiki style, big crazy Ku standing on some lava or something like that. So with Tiki Classics, I have a few different lamp ideas I want to work on, more traditional Tiki style mugs, and kind of get a little away from the kind of this fantasy kind of things that I've been doing, get back to what I really love. And that's going to start with something I'm going to show right now, which is this is a big deal for me. As a vintage Tiki guy, I can't explain to you what a major, massive deal this was for me. And only people who are like super obsessed with vintage Tiki mugs and have like a vast knowledge of vintage Tiki will really appreciate how amazing this is. Back when they had the Oceanic Arts auction, the big crazy auction where everything sold for nutty prices, right? Everybody knows that. There was a vintage Sperlin mold for this mug, which is the Sperlin Fog Cutter, which was used at Sam's Seafood. There was a green version of this used at Sam's Seafood, which became Don the Beachcomber. Basic carved wooden design, kind of fog cutter type mug, right? At the Oceanic Arts auction, they had the original mold for this, which freaked me out. Like, I couldn't believe that they had the mold for this thing. And I bid on it,
That's
and I
crazy.
tried. I put as much money down as I could afford at the time to try to win it. And because that Oceanic Arts auction went nutty, I lost it. I think it was me and I think Scott Taylor Tiki Pop. We were bidding against each other, and it eventually wound up in the hands of Omar with Oakwash. Everybody knows Oakwash in
Oh,
Louisiana.
yeah,
He
of course
won it.
you do.
He won it. He won the mold, and I was super jealous and sad and depressed. And as a vintage tiki guy and a mug maker, that would have been heaven for me to own that mold. Not only did it come with the mold, but it came with a vintage plaster master mold to make other molds. It was a whole set.
Oh,
The
man.
history of that
Wow.
thing, super basic design, but the history of this, if you're into vintage tiki, it's right there at the top. Like Sperlin made some of the most desirable pieces out there, and I just randomly a few months ago hit up Omar and was like, "Hey man, I know you have that Sperlin mold. I was wondering what you're going to do with it." And he's such a nice guy. He immediately wrote me back and said, "Hey man, I know you're into vintage tiki. I know you love that stuff. If you want it, it's all yours." And I just couldn't
Wow.
like mind blown. So
Yeah.
That
he
does
gave
not
me a
surprise me because he is the nicest guy I've ever met.
nicest guy ever. And
And at
my God,
Inuele this year, I took his daughter around, because she kind of was like vending with him, and then I was like, "Come on, hang with us," and we sang karaoke together and did all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was funny because the next night she was like dressed up in like tiki with a flower and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, they're just the nicest people.
nicest dude ever. And I hadn't had a lot of
Mhm.
interaction with Omar. I've never met him in person. But just for him to know who I was and know the kind of things I was into and to know how much I wanted that thing and just say, "Hey man, if you want it, it's just sitting in storage." And I got it in the mail and I was freaking out like a little kid on Christmas, opening it up, just staring at it, thinking about Stella Bodie and all the people that may have touched this thing back in the 60s when they were making these mugs for Oceanic Arts and Sam Seafood, wherever else these things wound up. This one actually, I know for a fact came from the LA Islanders. So these things were around. They were in the 60s. These things made their way around. But so I have that mold now, and I've only poured one. But here it is. This is my version of it. This is one that I made from the original Sperlin Oceanic Arts mold. And the mold actually had Oceanic Arts logo on the bottom, that their famous sail logo, which isn't on the one I have, isn't on some of those. So this one's probably even more rare. I've never seen one in person that has the logo on it. I didn't use the logo out of respect to Bob and Leroy and the family. I would never in a billion years use their logo on something without their permission. And I honestly don't even want to ask their permission. I feel like I'm not worthy. So I scraped the logo off on all the mugs and just put my Tiki Classics Moai logo on the bottom. But this is going to be the first project I get to after I wrap up these Mystery of the Moais. I'm going to get back to my roots and the things that I really love and getting into some vintage Tiki stuff. So this is going to be the first one coming out. I don't know how many I'm going to make. It's going to be super limited, but it's going to be more of a passion project versus a something serious. It's going to be something fun. But yeah, this is the first one, and I love it. And it's a little smaller than the original, oddly enough, but it kind of fits in the hand great. But that's the future of Tiki Classics. More vintage, traditional Tiki style stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. That was really generous of him, and we're really
He's
looking
the best.
forward to seeing everything you do in the future. We love your artistry and your work ethic and your passion for everything. Is there
Thank you.
anything else that you would like to say to tune-in viewers, or any last words for us here?
Hey, keep Tiki alive, man. I know
Right
there
on.
seems to be this flood of people recently who are selling off their collections. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's the economy or what, but I'm seeing a lot of people selling off their stuff. Keep it going, man. Tiki's bigger and better than ever, and every event you go to, it's just more and more people. Yeah, keep it going. Tiki's the best. It's just the best. The people are the best. It's just awesome. How can you not love it? You know what I mean? It's rad.
Right. We
We love Tiki.
wholeheartedly agree with that.
Aloha, and welcome to Historical Sips, the part of the show where we discuss tiki cocktails and their history. I'm your host, Emerald Jack from the Emerald Coast. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing the original Coffee Grog. The year is 1937. You've just finished your South Seas Island meal. You've reached your 2-drink zombie limit, and in true "if you can't make it to paradise, I'll bring it to you" fashion, are being served a flaming coffee grog, by none other than Don the Beachcomber himself, complete with a brilliant pour of rum set ablaze atop a mix of classic tiki spices. Hints of nutmeg, clove, and cinnamon fill the air, combining with a rich aroma of coffee as Bing Crosby's Sweet Leilani plays in the background. A beautiful end to a beautiful night. What's in a coffee grog? Break out your Sippin' Safari book and turn to page 48 for a complete list of ingredients, or go check out our Instagram at TuneInTiki.
All right, guys, that's the sound of our Mai Tais getting low, so we're going to go for a refill.
Thanks for listening and stay tuned to the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in.